Welcome to Everless, guys! I was waiting for this book for weeks and it arrived at the start of January and I tear through it in about 36 hours. I was not disappointed. Sarah Holland's writing was perfect. It's like that ultimate fantasy YA read with magic, myth, fairy tale, and with a love interest tied in there. It was fantastic, yet not cliche. Now, if you stay with me, I will tell you why it wasn't super cliche and why I cannot wait for the second book to come out. Literally cannot wait. I don't think I'm going to be able to. So I'm going to do a non-spoiler bit at the start. I will let you know when I'm getting onto the spoilers, and so you can like click off and go and buy it, and then you can join me back again when you have read the book and we can do the spoilers together, guys, because I'm that kind and caring and loving for you all. Let's start. So, Everless has sort of a medieval setting, and the main storyline has lots of myths and fairy tales tied into it. So the whole way through, we have two key sort of fairy tale ideas which are coming out. We have this story of the Fox and the Serpent, which keeps coming up, which is what the lead character read as a child, and her father read it to her. So that's one thing to bear in mind. Not that important until we get to the spoiler section, so you can forget about that if you wish. The second most important story, myth, fairy tale thing that we have going on is the idea of the sorcerer and the alchemist. The sorcerer and the alchemist steeped in the traditions of the land which is called Sempra, and although Sempra is not the entire world, it is like a huge area of land with cities within it, and it's completely closed off from the outside world. And it's said that the sorcerer and the alchemist closed it off years and years and years ago when the Queen took over, and they created this currency which basically makes time a physical object, and time becomes the currency of Everless. So that, as you can imagine, creates a huge divide between the wealthy and the poor. Basically, in order to get more currency rather than money, I suppose, you have to bleed. And so when you bleed, it bleeds your time and your years out of you, and that is made and forged into these blood irons. Each blood iron is worth a certain amount of time, and then, as you do with normal money, you use a certain amount of time to pay for certain things. So for example, if you're poor, you will end up just using your blood to pay for things, so you can have a really short life, because ever since the age of 17, which is when you're allowed to start bleeding yourself, you'll be using your own blood for currency, which isn't great. It's really difficult to get rich that way. If you're rich, however, you take in all of that money, as rich people do, or the blood irons, and you can melt it into hot drinks and tea and that sort of thing, and when you melt it in and you drink it, you take on those years. So as you can imagine, the wealthy can live for hundreds of years, and the poor live for like 30. It's not great. It's a huge wealth divide as you get in the everyday world. So we have a couple of lead characters which I'm going to take you through. So we have Jules, who is a female protagonist. She is really, really poor and she lives with her father, Papa. She just turned 17 when we start the book. We then obviously have her father, Papa. We have Liam Girling, who is a lord. We have Roan Girling, who is also a lord. As you can imagine, there is the Girling family who live in Everless. We have Caro, who is a servant to the Queen, or the Queen's second-in-command handmaiden. We have the Queen, and then we have Inez Gold, who is the ward of the Queen. She's like an adopted daughter. So where does the title of the book come from? Everless is the house of the Girlings, so it is the Lord's house nearby where Jules lives. There are a couple of these dotted throughout Sempra, and then the Queen has the palace in Sempra, and she obviously runs the land because she's the Queen. The Queen has been living for hundreds of years. She's like the oldest person ever. And there's like loads of like sort of stories of if she knew the sorceress, if she lived during the sorceress's time. Jules doesn't actually believe in the sorceress or the alchemist. She thinks it's all fairy stories because her dad told her that. Anyway, so Jules and Papa, dearest, they were originally in Everless in like the backstory to the book. Her dad was working as the blacksmith, which is quite a good servant position to have, so they were relatively high up in the realms of servantness. And so that meant that Jules got to grow up with the Girling boys, so with Liam and with Roan. However, We find out very early on in the book that there was some kind of catastrophe where Liam pushed Rowan into a fire. Dramatic, I know, he's trying to kill his brother, what? But anyway, because Jules sees this and helps to save Rowan, Jules and her father have to run away from the castle and go and set up their own life together away from that, because they fear that Liam, who is evil, will tell Lord and Lady Girling and they will be executed, because, like, it's not good to be saying that a lord tried to kill his brother, is it? Not great. So that all happens prior to the book starting, and when we join Jules in the book, she is currently trying to hunt for some fish or produce or something to sell so that they can pay their rent, because she doesn't want to sell her blood. However, it is her 17th birthday that her father has forgotten, so she can actually go and drain her blood this time. She's allowed to do it. So she is like trudging through the forest and she finds a fish, but in order to catch this fish to sell at market, when she goes in the water to catch it, time slows, like only for like 2 seconds. It just goes do 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 do. And this is an interesting element because people aren't supposed to be able to control time. Obviously they can just drain time from themselves, so it's bizarre that a couple of points at the start of the book Jules has these situations where time slows ever so slightly. It just sort of fractures a little bit. So that's Jules' backstory, and I'm going to give you a tiny bit of the Queen's backstory, and then shortly I'm going to go into spoilers. So the Queen has this ward called Innes, or Innes Gold, because the Queen is called Queenie Gold? I can't remember the Queen's actual name. Years and years and years ago, we're talking generations ago, the Queen announced that she would adopt a ward and an orphan, and she would take them in and they would become her heir because she was getting old. Although you can keep drinking blood irons to stay young, it's only gonna sustain you for for 100 and so years. You can't sustain it forever. So she said to the land, "Orphans, I will look at you and take you in if I like you, and you will be my heir." Which sounds all lovely and dandy, except then parents, poor parents who can barely feed themselves, start to abandon their children on the gates of her palace. Not great. It meant that lots of children ended up in orphanages, lots of children ended up as servants, and there is a lot of stories about the Queen being a little bit evil to some of these children that were left to her. But eventually we get Innes Gold, who turns out to be her ward, and she lives with her, and Innes, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but anyway, she is betrothed to Rowan. Rowan is one of the Lord Girling's children, boys who grew up with Jules, and Jules had a little bit of a crush on Rowan. I didn't love Rowan as a character that much, really. He was a little bit flat, and a little bit meh. And also, we're not supposed to like Liam. He's a little bit evil, but I kind of liked the fact that he was evil, but not really. He was just dark and brooding and seemed to always be trying so hard to obey the rules and do what is right that it made him super unpopular in the face of his brother, who is outgoing and out to please. Jules, on the other hand, I really liked as a lead character. My only issue with her, and I think it will be resolved in the next book, is that she wasn't explored enough. I think that Sara gave us so much world building, which was awesome. I loved her for that. But it meant that although we know the world really well, we don't actually know our lead character that well. She had moments of exploration, moments of realization, but I think we were just setting the groundwork. We weren't delving into her. However, the way the book ends, that opens it up for us to know her a lot more. That is where I am leaving you in terms of the non-spoiler review. Now we are going into the spoiler section, so stop here if you haven't read it yet, guys, because I am going all out with the spoilers and I'm not holding anything back. So if you haven't read it, turn off right now. Have you gone? Gone? So I have to say, And you may have guessed it from what I was just saying about Liam, but I did guess that Rowan was never going to be the love affair that Jules wanted, and he was always going to be a bit flat, and that actually Liam was the boy for her. And it was, I mean, I think it was deliberately a little bit more obvious because, I mean, Liam was never evil. He never did anything terrible. Apart from stories that we heard from Jules, he never did anything terrible within the book. Everything that he did was just obeying the laws of the kingdom, and it was always not quite as dark as it could have been. So for example, making Jules go and shell those gavas, or the fruits, I think they were called gavas, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. He came down to help her, and it always seemed to me as if Rowan was just trying to sleep with her, as he seemingly did with every single servant around. He was a little bit of a sleazebag, and I quite liked the way Sara hinted at that without actually showing you it. So things like the lavender scent that was on him rather than the rosewood, it was so almost subtle, but not like subtle enough that you could have missed it if you were skim reading, but it was obvious enough that everybody was hopefully gonna get it. So I quite liked that, and I loved the fact that it sets it up perfectly for Jules and Liam to have this lovely little love affair in the next book, I hope. If they don't, I'll be really gutted. Now, the twists that I didn't get. I knew Caro was gonna be important. I didn't get that she was gonna be the sorcerer. I was literally gobsmacked, like when something happens in a movie and you go like that's what I did when Caro was revealed, when she like dropped the queen down and she was like, yeah, it's me. I was like, what? It was great. I loved that. And then when we found out that Jules was the alchemist, I was like, yeah you are, yeah you are, because something within me, I think it's me stereotyping, but in the recesses of my brain, I was just thinking, alchemist, male. You know, it's complete gender stereotyping, but in the back of my head, I just thought alchemist male. And I think that was quite deliberate of Sara in using an alchemist as a figure, because we do always think of the alchemist as a male, lonely, wizardy character roaming through the forest. That's completely the image I had in my head, and it was so smashed to pieces. And I love the idea that the heart was split into these 12 pieces and these 12 different lives, and that the sorcerer is constantly trying to take her powers back. That was great. It was such a clever twist. And although the book was only like 300 and odd pages and it didn't feel like it explored some of these avenues enough for me. I mean, ideally I would have liked another 100 or 200 pages. However, so many elements of this book feel like they're just gonna go in the second book, you know? They feel like Sara is gonna explore them so much more, and I'm really hoping for a chunkier, longer book for the next one. I'm hoping this is laying some serious groundwork, and it's just all to play for in the second book. Because it is! Everything is to play for. Like, I mean, yes, I know that eventually Jules will end up with Liam and it'll all be fine and dandy because it's a book and it's, you know, YA and all that jazz, but I just can't wait to see how we get there. This is like definitely 5 out of 5, and this means that every book so far that I have read in 2018, or at least when I'm filming this, every book that I've read in 2018, which is the Grisha series, all 3, and then this one, like, and this is what, we're not even at the 10th of January yet, so I mean, they're all 5 stars, guys. This has been a very good start to 2018. I am very happy. That's pretty much everything I have to say on Everless. I reckon you should read it. Actually, if you're watching this far, I'm hoping you've already read it. If you haven't, what are you doing spoiling it for yourself? I've just ruined the whole end of the book for you. Idiot. Anyway, if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. If you really liked this video, maybe subscribe. If you didn't, tell me why, and then I will, like, take it under consideration. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, guys, and I will see you later in the week. Bye!